I'm Joey.T.Cartoon.P and you're watching the Cartoon Palooza. Before we go see an animated movie based on a comedian's routine, let's go watch an animated movie based on a comedian's routine. Coming from a studio that's already made animated movies based on a comedian's routine. In the tradition of animated movies that follow comedians' routines. This is B-Movie. Before I begin, I want to address my exposure to Jerry Seinfeld. Unlike most kids who grew up watching his show, I didn't know much about it until I reached high school. Much like Doctor Who, most of my exposure came from friends and family, sharing quotes and talking about Seinfeld, as opposed to watching it myself. Alright, Festivus for the rest of us, puffy pirate shirt, and no soup for you. Good? For most of what I gather about Seinfeld's shtick, it revolves around observational comedy. This is a dead giveaway with the opening quote to the movie. A funny observation from an observational comedian. I guess I wasn't mincing words when I said he was an observational comedian. Our movie focuses on an insect who's forced into choosing a career. He wants to do something different with his life, which leads him to fall in love with a girl and go on an adventure. This causes personal damage to his hive, causing them to band together and save the day. If this sounds familiar, it's because it's pretty much the plot to Ants. Don't worry, it's a thing for DreamWorks to rip off their own plots when they're not ripping off Pixar or Disney. They move straight onto their own stories. Just watch Shark Tale right after The Road to El Dorado and see an inspired plot where con men are mistaken for gods. Copied plots aside, Jerry Seinfeld plays the leading role Barry. He's a bee who's not comfortable with working the same job every day and wants to explore the world before conforming with the norm. In case you feel Barry the Bee is an original character with a personality that makes him more competent than simply cracking jokes, I apologize. You will learn fast that all of Barry's lines are excuses for Seinfeld to make observational jokes, puns, or finishing a punchline for someone else.
3 days of college? I'm glad I took off one day in the middle and just hitchhiked around the hive. This isn't a good fella. This is a bad fella.
Those ladies? Aren't they our cousins too?
Distant. Well, like about 10 pages. 75 is pretty much our limit.
What do you expect from a DreamWorks movie? Everything to be like How to Train Your Dragon? Hasn't anybody learned by now that mediocre DreamWorks movies are cutaways for snarky characters to crack jokes at every waking moment? Because that's all we expect out of cartoons. Simple jokes. Simple jokes for the simple-minded. No need to have complexity, just laughs. Thankfully, it isn't all jokes and puns. For now. When Barry isn't talking, we learn that there is an immortal code animals live by where they can't talk to humans. In most animated movies, it's always treated as a big deal when the animal talks to people. The problem with the movie, and the cliche, is that it's pretty inconsistent. Because the consequence for any animal who talks to humans is that they just talk to humans. Very little is made to seem like talking animals are a big deal. Therefore, in some scenes when it's treated like a big deal, it's just, oh, yeah, that's cool. They say it's illegal for bees to talk to people, but nowhere do we see Barry get arrested or charged for talking. I think it should have been treated like a bigger deal, since nowhere do they mention other bees talking to people. Which brings the question, if Barry is the first bee in the history of history to talk to people, maybe at one point in the production of the movie, this was treated like a bigger deal. But for now, it's taking it like a natural right to simply a hall monitor telling you to get back to your first period class. When Barry leaves the hive, he encounters a florist who he has an unspecified, debatably platonic, and vaguely romantic relationship with. They make plenty of hints that they're dating, to the point where she stops seeing Patrick Warburton, playing Tulio from Road to El Dorado, playing Patrick Warburton. Much like people talking to animals, I don't see why it's supposed to be a big deal, since this is a world where all animals can talk to each other. Yeah, you can question the specifics later, but for now, I think the world would still exist if they didn't have this dumb code all animals have to follow if there aren't any direct consequences to them.
Yes, I know. I'm so
You're talking.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's okay. It's fine. It's just, I know I'm dreaming, but I don't recall going to bed.
The nasally voice, the mid to early 2000s. It's a Renee Zellweger character. So Seinfeld and Zellweger are the two interests in the movie. Like I said, very vague on whether or not this is a romantic relationship. So she shows him how bees are used to mass produce honey when in his hive, it's shared evenly. You could say there's a socialist versus capitalist allegory, but I'd be reading too deeply into it. This ain't Bernie Sanders versus Donald Trump-y. Barry finds it in himself to expose humans in the act of stealing their product without permission and takes it to court. Jeez, that sounds familiar. Wink, wink. Because, as most animated movies would do, explore the unimaginable and defy the laws of gravity, we're stuck to a courtroom drama. Whoop-de-doo. The movie will make you question whether or not bees will get their share of the pie or just let the humans revel in their riches. And honestly, it don't even matter since this is a talking bee movie starring Jerry Seinfeld. As you would imagine me doing with most DreamWorks movies from the mid-2000s, this is nothing more than a mediocre display of pop culture and useless celebrity voice work. However, this movie does manage to have a slight edge over most mediocre DreamWorks movies, by a bee's wing, if you dare say, most of which comes from the visual effects. They're fun to look at, and yeah, some of the visual jokes, they're fine. Oh god, I hate it when I have to review a movie that's just so fine. Damn you DreamWorks for making another average movie to watch. On one hand, it's a stupid excuse for a comedian to make observational jokes in a feature-length animated movie. On the other hand, it gives enough nice stuff to look at on the screen, like the roller coaster chase sequences, that, believe it or not, are a common cliche in DreamWorks movies. I'm gonna be 120% honest with you. If this movie were to have shown up on television and I didn't have anything better else to do, I probably wouldn't mind watching it again. Its story, dumb as nails. Its effects, pretty cool. Whole experience, Just give this movie the okay reading and get it out of my face. So for my question for the day, what is your favorite animated bee? Probably gonna have to go into insects in general because as far as animated bees go, I think there's only the Honey Nut Cheerios bee. But anyways, comment and let me know. I'm Joey.T.Cartoon.P and thanks for watching this adequate, painfully made review of Bee Movie on the Cartoon Palooza.